Welcome back, everyone. Today we're tackling a listener request, and honestly, it's a bit of a deep one. We're diving into the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Ooh, sounds intense. Are we like going full spooky mode for this one?
Haha, not quite. But it is a text that deals with life, death, and what might come after.
Okay, so less Halloween, more like existential exploration.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is the version we're using is actually an audio recording read by Richard Gere.
I know, right? Pretty cool.
Wow, Richard Gere. Okay, I'm definitely intrigued now. But where do we even begin with something as complex as the Tibetan Book of the Dead? I mean, it sounds pretty heavy.
Yeah, it definitely has a reputation, but what we really want to do is unpack how this text applies to life right now, not just what happens after we die.
I like that approach. So what's the main takeaway? What's the big idea that runs through the whole thing?
Well, one of the core teachings is that everything we experience both in life and in death is ultimately a projection of our own minds.
Wait, so like we're creating our own reality? In a way, yeah. The book suggests that all the visions, emotions, even the challenges we face, they're all stemming from within.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So it's more about understanding our own minds than about some spooky afterlife.
Exactly. It's like a guidebook to understanding those projections and ultimately finding liberation from the suffering they can cause.
Okay, but how does that actually work? It's not like we're like conjuring up demons in our daily lives.
Uh-huh. Maybe not literally, but think about a time you were so angry it felt like you were surrounded by flames. Like everything was burning up around you.
Oh yeah, I've totally been there.
Well, that's the hell realm mindset that the book describes.
Hmm, interesting. So it's not a literal place, more like a state of mind.
Precisely. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead goes even further, suggesting that life itself is a series of bardos.
Bardos, what are those?
It basically means intermediate state, not just between lives, but between any two experiences.
Hold on, so every time we transition from one thing to another, that's a bardo.
That's the idea. Think about that moment of hesitation before you make a big decision, or, the uncertainty you feel when you start a new job.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. Those are definitely in-between moments.
Right. So even just having this conversation, we're kind of in a bardo right now.
Whoa, mind blown. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead is saying that understanding these bardos can help us navigate life's transitions.
Exactly. It's about becoming more aware of those in-between states and learning to move through them with more grace and understanding.
Okay, this is already pretty deep. But if life is full of these bardos, what about the ultimate transition? Death.
Hmm.
What does the book say happens then?
Well, it describes a journey through various stages of consciousness. First, there's a detachment from the physical world, like a sense of internal light emerging.
Is that like those near-death experiences people talk about? You know, the whole moving towards the light thing.
Yeah, it could be interpreted that way. The text describes it as a glimpse of your true nature, which is sometimes called dharmata.
Dharmata. Okay, I got to remember that one. What's that exactly?
Think of it like the calm, clear space that's always present beneath all the noise of our thoughts and emotions. That sense of peace you get at the edge of exhaustion when your mind finally goes quiet.
Oh, yeah, like after a really good workout or when you finally drift off to sleep.
Exactly. That's a little taste of dharmata. Now, for some, merging with that light signifies enlightenment. Like, game over, you've reached the ultimate goal.
Wow, liberation. But does everyone get there?
Well, the Book of the Dead acknowledges that for most people, the journey continues.
So what happens next?
The text describes moving into this realm of sounds and colors, really vibrant and intense. And then come visions of peaceful and wrathful deities, each one offering a path to enlightenment.
Okay, that sounds a bit trippy and maybe a little scary, to be honest.
Yeah.
Are these deities like real beings?
That's where the idea of mental projections comes in again. The book suggests these visions aren't external beings, but rather reflections of your own mind.
So they're like different parts of ourselves.
Exactly. They represent different qualities you can cultivate on the path to liberation. Like they're showing you the potential that's already within you.
Okay, so it's not about worshiping these deities. It's about recognizing them as aspects of ourselves.
Right. And then there's this other element that comes into play. The pull of samsara.
Samsara, what's that?
It's basically the cycle of suffering. It's about clinging to desires and attachments that keep us bound to the cycle of death and rebirth. Like that feeling of always wanting something you can't have, even when you know it might not be good for you.
Oh yeah, I know that feeling all too well.
Well, the text describes samsara as being drawn towards the six realms of existence: hell, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, jealous gods, and gods.
Oh, 6 realms. Okay, that's a lot to unpack. What are those all about?
Think of them as symbolic representations of different mental states we all experience. Each realm is driven by certain emotions and ways of seeing the world.
So, like, the hell realm is all about anger.
Yeah, exactly.
What's
Have you ever been so angry you just wanted to lash out at the world?
Yeah, definitely, especially in traffic.
Well, that's a glimpse of the hell realm mindset.
Yikes. So if hell is anger, what are the other realms like?
Well, the hungry ghost realm is characterized by this insatiable desire, always craving more but never finding satisfaction. Then there's the animal realm, which is driven by instinct and ignorance, just focused on basic survival.
Hmm. So, like, if I'm constantly scrolling through social media feeling jealous of everyone else's perfect lives, that's a taste of the jealous God realm.
You got it. And the book emphasizes that these aren't meant to be judgments, like you're a bad person for experiencing these states. It's more about recognizing them, understanding how they affect us, and finding ways to move towards more skillful ways of being.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those deities we talked about earlier? Are they connected to these realms too?
They can be. Some deities are associated with specific realms, while others represent broader qualities of enlightenment. They're like embodiments of wisdom and compassion, offering guidance and support on the path to liberation.
So they're not just mythical beings, but represent aspects of our own potential.
Exactly. And one of the most fascinating ways the book categorizes these deities is through the 5 Buddha families.
5 Buddha families. Okay, you're really testing my Buddhist knowledge here.
Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds.
Hmm.
Each family represents a fundamental energy that we all possess, along with a specific poison or negative emotion that can cloud our minds.
Wait, poisons, like actual poison.
Not literally. Think of them as negative emotions that can lead to suffering. Anger, pride, desire, envy, and ignorance. But here's the key. Each family also offers a wisdom that can overcome those poisons, a way to transform those challenging energies into something positive.
So it's like each family has a dark side and a light side, a challenge to overcome, and a wisdom to embrace.
You got it. Take the Buddha family, for example. It's associated with the poison of confusion and ignorance, but it also embodies the wisdom of Dharmata, that underlying reality we talked about earlier.
Ah, right. So if I'm feeling lost and confused, that's the Buddha family's energy at play, and I can tap into the wisdom of Dharmata to find clarity and peace.
Exactly. Then there's the Vajra family, associated with aggression. Its wisdom is this mirror-like quality that allows you to see things clearly without getting swept away by anger.
Interesting. Like reflecting things back calmly instead of reacting.
Exactly. Then you have the Retna family, which deals with pride. It offers the wisdom of equality, recognizing the inherent worth in ourselves and others.
Okay, I'm taking notes here. What about the other 2 families?
Right, so the Padma family is all about desire and passion. Its wisdom is discrimination, which helps us channel that passion into compassion and skillful action. And finally, the Karma family deals with envy. It offers the wisdom of accomplishing actions, transforming that envy into positive change.
Wow, this is like a personality test based on Buddhist principles. So these Buddha families aren't just abstract concepts, they're actually energies within us all.
Precisely. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers tools for working with those energies, transforming those poisons into wisdom, and ultimately finding liberation from suffering.
This is pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned peaceful and wrathful deities earlier. What's the difference between those?
The text describes this kind of progression, starting with peaceful deities, then moving to Vidyadharas, they're like divine communicators, and finally to wrathful Herukas.
So are those like levels of enlightenment? Like you start peaceful, graduate to communicator, and then become a wrathful badass?
Haha. It's not quite that linear. It's more like mirroring our own experiences. Sometimes we're in a peaceful state, but then things get challenging. We try to communicate, but it doesn't always work. And sometimes we just need a good shake-up, a jolt of energy to wake us up.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. So like if I'm having a sudden insight or maybe even a psychic experience, that could be the Vidyadhara realm. But if I, get into a car accident, that's the Haruka's energy shaking things up.
That's an interesting way to put it. The point is, these energies are all part of the journey. They're all part of waking up to reality.
This is seriously mind-blowing stuff. I think I need a moment to process all of this.
I agree. This is just the beginning of our exploration, and there's much more to uncover. Okay, I think my brain has officially been stretched to its limit. So we've talked about all these different realms and states of being, but it all seems very focused on, our own experience. What about our interactions with other people? Especially when they're going through a difficult transition.
Like death.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do we show up for someone who's dying? Does the Tibetan Book of the Dead have anything to say about that?
Actually, it does. There's quite a bit of guidance on how to be present with someone who's dying.
Really? That's pretty amazing. I mean, I imagine that's such a delicate and emotionally charged situation.
It is. The book emphasizes creating a calm and supportive atmosphere for the dying person, focusing on honesty and trust. And it also talks about how important our own state of mind is in those moments.
So, like, how we're feeling and acting actually impacts the person who's dying.
Exactly. Our energy, our presence, it all becomes part of their experience. If we're panicking or overwhelmed by grief, it can make it harder for them to find peace.
Wow, that's a heavy responsibility. But what if you don't know what to say or do? You wouldn't want to make things worse by accident.
It's totally understandable to feel uncertain in those situations. The book reminds us that while we can't know exactly what the dying person is going through, simply being present and grounded can be incredibly supportive.
So it's more about just being there, offering a sense of calm and love?
Yeah, it's about offering stability and compassion without trying to, control or fix the situation.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So even though the Tibetan Book of the Dead goes into all these details about visions and realms and deities, it's ultimately about something much simpler.
You could say that. It also acknowledges that you don't need to memorize every detail to benefit from it.
That's a relief. Because I have to admit, even with all your amazing explanations, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with all this information.
It's definitely a lot to take in. But the key takeaway is that the book isn't meant to be a strict doctrine or a set of rules to follow. It's more about understanding the nature of reality, of consciousness, and how our minds work.
So it's more about the overall message and the feeling it evokes than remembering all the specific details.
Exactly. It's about approaching the text with an open mind and heart, allowing the emotional impact to guide your understanding.
Okay, I can definitely get behind that. But I'm still curious about how this whole idea of mental projections plays out in the text. Can you give some specific examples?
Sure. For instance, just before death, the text says a bright light might appear and warns you not to be afraid, because it's not some external force, it's actually the radiance of your own dharmata, your true nature shining through.
So it's not like going towards the light, like in those near-death experiences, but recognizing the light within yourself.
Yes, it's saying that even in death, there's this incredible potential for awakening, for connecting with something vast and luminous within.
Okay, that's beautiful. What about those visions of deities? How does that tie into mental projections?
Well, the book emphasizes that if you encounter peaceful deities and then wrathful ones, it's not about these beings existing independently outside of you. They're reflections of your own mind manifesting in different forms.
So even the scary, wrathful ones, what are they supposed to represent?
They can symbolize those aspects of ourselves that we might fear or reject, those intense emotions we try to suppress.
Yeah.
But the book suggests that by recognizing them as part of our own being, we can start to work with them, to transform them into wisdom and compassion.
It's like those shadow aspects we all have. The parts of ourselves we don't always want to admit to.
Exactly. And then there's Mara, the Lord of Death. He often appears in Buddhist texts.
Ooh, that sounds a bit ominous. What does Encounter in Mara represent?
He's often depicted as a tempter, a figure who embodies doubt, fear, and attachment. He tries to lure you away from the path of enlightenment back into the cycle of suffering.
So he's like the ultimate bad guy.
You could see it that way. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead urges you not to be trapped by Mara's illusions, because even he is just a projection of your own mind.
So it's about facing your fears, recognizing them as part of yourself, even the fear of death itself.
Precisely. The text suggests that by recognizing Mara as a product of your own mind, you can break free from his grasp and continue on the path to liberation.
This is incredibly powerful stuff.
Yeah.
It seems like the Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't just about preparing for death, but like offering a way to navigate life's challenges with more awareness and courage.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing the impermanence of everything, the nature of our minds, and ultimately, the potential for awakening that exists within each of us.
I'm really starting to see how this ancient text can offer valuable insights, even for people who aren't Buddhist.
Absolutely. It's a rich source of wisdom and psychological insight that can benefit anyone seeking a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. The bardos, the realms, the deities, the importance of recognizing projections. It's amazing how this one text ties together so many different aspects of the human experience.
It is. And there's still more fascinating layers to explore.
Okay, so we've gone pretty deep into the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but I'm still a little unsure about how to actually, use it. Are we supposed to, like, memorize all this stuff about realms and deities just in case we die?
Well, trying to memorize the whole thing wouldn't be that useful. Traditionally, it was read to the dying person, like to guide them through the bardo.
So it's like a spiritual companion or maybe a roadmap for the afterlife.
Exactly. But even if you're not, facing death right this second, just listening to the book with an open mind can be really beneficial.
So it's like planting seeds of wisdom. They might blossom later on, even if we don't remember every detail.
That's a great way to put it. The sounds, the imagery, the teachings, they can all have a pretty deep impact on us, even if we're not consciously thinking about it all the time.
Right, takes the pressure off. But is there anything in the book itself about how to listen to it? Like, are there specific things you should or shouldn't do while you're listening?
Well, the text emphasizes approaching it with reverence and an open heart. Traditionally, it's recommended to listen in a calm and quiet environment, free from distractions.
So no, like, multitasking while listening to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, probably not a good idea.
Probably not. But more than the external setting, what matters most is your internal state. The book says to cultivate a sense of curiosity, a willingness to just be present with whatever comes up as you listen.
That makes sense. It's about approaching it with a beginner's mind, letting go of expectations and judgments.
Exactly. And there's actually a really cool line in the book. It says that even just hearing the text once can make your mind 9 times clearer during the bardo.
9 times. Okay, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is. Whether you take that literally or not, it points to the idea that engaging with these teachings, even just listening to them, can have a powerful effect.
I'm starting to see that this whole deep dive has been pretty mind-blowing, to be honest.
It's been a trip. And I think
Ah,
what makes the Tibetan Book of the Dead so interesting is that even if you don't agree with all the beliefs of Tibetan Buddhism, there's still so much wisdom to be found there.
totally. It's about understanding the nature of reality, the way our minds work, and the impermanence of everything.
Exactly. And speaking of wisdom, there's one last thought-provoking question from the text that I wanted to share. It says, emptiness cannot harm emptiness.
Ooh, that's a good one. What does that make you think about in terms of fear and reality?
It makes me think about how much of our fear comes from this idea that we have a solid self, a separate ego that can be harmed. But what if we really understand the emptiness, the interconnectedness of everything, the way things are constantly shifting and changing? Maybe that's where we find true fearlessness and acceptance of how things really are.
Wow, that's deep. I'm gonna have to meditate on that one for a while.
Me too.
Yeah.
And remember, we've only just scratched the surface here. If this deep dive has piqued your interest, there's a whole world of Tibetan Buddhist thought out there waiting to be explored.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe we'll all start seeing our own little bardos differently now. That moment of hesitation before we order coffee, the nervousness of a first date, the anxiety of a job interview, they're all chances to practice awareness and maybe even find a little liberation.
I love that. And remember, you always have the power to choose how you navigate those transitions, to recognize the projections of your own mind, and to connect with that wisdom that's always within you.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Tibetan Book of the Dead. We'll see you next time for another adventure into the world of knowledge.